What's up, guys? I got lots to talk about. Going to try to get it done real quick, real rapidly, as I usually say, because I got to get out of here. But last night, what was I, 2-1? I think it was two like easy wins and one like obvious loser as well. Well, the hockey one it should have been a lot easier than it was, I guess. Pittsburgh Penguins are up 3-0 into what was it, the second period? Maybe even was it into the third? No, I think it was into the second period. They blew the whole lead. It was tied 3-3, and they did get the final goal to win that game, luckily. So blowing a 3-0 lead, not great, but they still got there. So that was good. Utah Jazz was kind of looking a little dicey, but they turned it on. I had a really big second half and put that game away. Nice outright win for the Utah Jazz. And then the Memphis Grizzlies were just awful. They just didn't get there. What can you do? We move on to today. I'm going to start talking about college bowls. And one thing I forgot to mention in that Jacksonville State one that I actually had that play on, one thing that would have made it even worse if that game were to have lost was that Jacksonville State not only was the whole game about like turnovers, but also Jacksonville State had two of their quarterbacks get injured in that game. So that made it like even more like that would have been even more difficult to take. Although I think the final touchdown that they got that tied the game, sent it into overtime, I think the quarterback that started the game for them was actually back in the game at that point, and he threw that one. So I don't know, but they did have two. I think he got injured, and their guy that replaced him both got injured in that game. So that's just kind of ridiculous. That's crazy. Speaking of ridiculous, I'll just mention it. I feel bad for the Old Dominion players last night, especially if you got it at like a good number, like below 3, or maybe even if you got them as like a small underdog price. You are probably going to be ripping your hair out. And yeah, Old Dominion, they were up huge for like that whole game. And yeah, maybe the lead was kind of unwarranted, I guess you could say, because it was a lot of it was on turnovers. Sure, they were getting outstatted by quite a bit in that game, so they shouldn't have been as far ahead as they were. It should have been a much closer game. I guess maybe they should have even been losing statistically, but they weren't. They were winning. I think they were winning 35-7 in like the fourth quarter, maybe, or the third quarter. They blew the entire lead. It was either a 28-point lead or a 21-point lead. They blew the whole thing. And what wound up happening is, and they missed a field goal at some point along the way. Their field goal unit was like a total disaster in the game, Old Dominion. They had another opportunity at a very makeable field goal, I think, to push the lead back to 10, which would have pretty much iced the game at the end there when they were still up 7. That got blocked. So then Western Kentucky got one more shot at getting a touchdown. And then Western Kentucky got to a point where they had to convert a 4th and 17 to continue the game, basically. Otherwise, the game would have been over. Oh, and Old Dominion just leaves one of their wide receivers completely in the open, untouched, no defender even near him, touchdown. Sends the game to overtime. Then in overtime, Old Dominion had the ball first. They got down to like the 1 foot line, probably. Couldn't get into the end zone. Got called for a penalty. I don't know if it was holding or whatever it was. Knocked them back 10 yards. They had to settle for a field goal attempt, really a short field goal, and that got blocked as well, and they wound up losing the game. Just absolutely ridiculous. That's why I hate bowl season. The bowl season giveth, and the bowl season taketh away, I suppose. Tonight there is a bowl game. Of course there is. Every night there pretty much is. This is the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl. Is that what this is? In Frisco, Texas? Yeah, great. Nobody's going to want to watch this piece of crap. This is Texas San Antonio, who are up from 9.5 to 12 and going through the 12, it looks like, as the huge favorite, with 64% of the tickets on them and 75% of the cash on them. So they have the cash discrepancy against Marshall. There are reasons for this. I lean Texas San Antonio as well, even though I'm not going to do it. I don't like laying like huge points like this in the bowls. In the bowls, like in the past, by the way, you'd see like these early bowl games, a lot of these huge favorites you'd see like not covering. You'd see a lot of underdogs coming through in these early bowls, because those would tend to be the teams that are like more motivated. Those are the teams that like got into a bowl that didn't expect to get into a bowl, or maybe they're playing like one of their first bowls ever or something like that, versus like a team that was disappointed and like fell into this bowl. But now what we have is, with the transfer portal, you have teams that just don't care. Like even lower teams just don't care about this bowl, and they have everybody transferring out. That's the case with Marshall in this game. They have a ton of guys transferring out. So Marshall is really just like a shell. And I know I said that about Ohio in their bowl, and they somehow put up a ton of points on offense. I don't know how that happened because Ohio had lost their quarterback to the transfer portal, I think, or maybe graduation. I forget. They had a lot of guys on their offense opt out. It is the same for Marshall, though. They have a ton of guys opting out, including, I believe, two of their quarterbacks. And now the quarterback for Marshall, even though he did play some this year, is Chad Pennington's son. Cole Pennington is their quarterback in this game. And he has the excellent statistic, I believe it's him, on his college career, I think, or maybe it's just this season, in which he has 0 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Chad Pennington's son, let's go, baby. He's a chip off the old block. It depends on how good you think Chad was. Chad Pennington. This guy is not quite a Chad, maybe not quite his father, but Cole Pennington is the quarterback for Marshall in this game. They have a ton of guys opting out. Marshall won a bowl last year, even though it was some crap bowl against UConn, I believe. Marshall won that game as like a pretty big favorite. So, I mean, they've won some bowls, of course, in their program history. So I don't think this game really quite means as much as it actually does to Texas San Antonio, who Texas San Antonio moved up to FBS not that long ago, like within the last like decade or so. And I believe they still do not have a bowl win in their program history. I think they're like 0-4, 0-5, something along those lines. And they lost a bowl last year as well. They were in one of these early season bowls, and I believe they lost like 18-12 or something like that. I don't even remember who it was to, but a lot of these guys on this team were on that Texas San Antonio team. And I think they're going to be motivated to try to, because I believe, like I said, I don't think the program has a bowl win in their history. So I think they're going to show up for this. And they don't have as many guys opting out at all. They still have their star quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in that conference that Texas San Antonio is in, I believe. Frank Harris, is that his name? Franco Harris, the Immaculate Reception. No, something Harris. Harris is the quarterback for UTSA. He's a very good quarterback. So all of that being said, yeah, there's a reason Texas San Antonio is a gigantic favorite here, but I would still only look that way. I just can't lay like 12 points. If you got in at like below the 10, I think you probably have a pretty good bet on that game, and I will just leave it at that. Moving to college basketball, there are at least a bunch of leans that I have here, and I don't see any of the like market percentages yet, but I can say that I think Virginia is in a better spot than Memphis is in that game. One of the big games on the slate, Virginia, Memphis. I think they're both ranked now. Memphis is up from 2 to 2.5, but the line is kind of telling you that, if this is in Memphis, which I believe it is, that Virginia is actually the slightly better team, even though I think they're ranked lower than Memphis is. But I'm not even sure what's going on with that one. But I think the reason I like Virginia a little bit in that one, although I'm not going to play it, is that they're coming off a really close call against Northeastern. Northeastern played them to within 2, and that's a game where Virginia, I don't know what the line was. Virginia had to have been a huge favorite there. So I think that's going to cause Virginia to come focused a little bit here. Even though this is actually Virginia's first road game of the season, true road game. It is a true road game. So that gives me a little bit of pause because teams tend to not do great a lot of times in their first true road game. But that Northeastern game was so bad for Virginia. They somehow escaped. When a huge favorite has an escape like that, they tend to bounce back and do better in the next game. Memphis is coming off a big win, I believe, over Clemson. Pretty big game there for Memphis. They played a few big games in a row, really. Actually, they've played a really tough schedule looking back. They played Missouri, Michigan, Arkansas, and then more recently, Villanova was one of the better teams they played. And then they did play Mississippi and VCU, all these big games in a row, really. And then their last 2 games against quite good teams, against Texas A&M and Clemson, and they beat both of them. So now it might be a situation where, like, does Memphis have that much left in the tank? Like, I don't think they're going to be unfocused for Virginia, so I can't quite get there with the play, but I do lean to Virginia there with Memphis coming off so many big games in a row, and Virginia coming off a bad performance against Northeastern. So that's the way I look there. I do have one play in college basketball, which I'll get to in a second. I'm trying to run through a couple of these games real quick. I lean to Stephen F. Austin against New Mexico State. Ken Pom, by the way, I believe has Memphis winning that game by 2. This game, I believe they have Stephen F. Austin winning by 11, and Stephen F. Austin is up from 9.5 to 11. Stephen F. Austin played, they've lost 2 games in a row to teams that aren't that, well, Louisiana Tech is not that bad, and then they lost to Wyoming, but now they've had 10 days off, so I think that's helpful for Stephen F. Austin to have 10 days off to, like, break that losing momentum. And, like, losing to Wyoming, I mean, Wyoming's not very good this year, but it is, at the very least, that's a tough place to play. And now Stephen F. Austin gets New Mexico State. Like I said, Stephen F. Austin is up from 9 to 11. It might be going through the 11. New Mexico State is off of like probably their biggest couple of games of the season. They just played basically 2 games in a row against New Mexico. They had Northern New Mexico, a non-D1 team, like mixed into the middle there, and didn't really play well in that game. But that was a major sandwich between 2 games against their biggest rival in New Mexico there. So they didn't even really show up for Northern New Mexico and only won by 5 somehow. But they lost the first game to New Mexico really embarrassingly on the road by like 40-something points. They got absolutely demolished by a pretty good New Mexico team. New Mexico State, not a good team this year, but then what did New Mexico State do in the rematch against them at home? They played them to within 1. So New Mexico State had a huge performance in their most recent game there 4 days ago against New Mexico. I don't know if they're going to be able to get back up off the mat after that for Stephen F. Austin, even though Stephen F. Austin is a pretty good team. I'm almost convincing myself to play Stephen F. Austin here. I mean, should I do it? Maybe. I don't like laying like huge favorites like that, but I can't even find it on the schedule here. What's up with that? Oh, they're under SFA on this one. Am I going to do it? I can lay 10.5. Yeah, I'm going to do it. Screw it. I'll lay Stephen F. Austin 10.5. I like that one. I'm going to do that. And then, so I'm going to be on 2 college basketball plays. Stephen F. Austin will be one of them. And then what else we got? I don't have that much time either. God, college basketball, man, it's so overwhelming. There's so much of a slate here. Marquette, I think, looks like they're in a little bit of a trap. They're a really highly ranked team playing at Providence. I don't see much of a situational angle there, but Marquette only laying 4.5 on the road. Looks a little bit sus. Ken Pom has the game at 5. So, yeah, that's kind of – those are my feelings on that, really. Providence is coming off a couple of not great performances against some really bad teams. So I think they're just kind of going through the motions, maybe looking ahead to this game a little bit. So I lean very slightly to Providence, but that's certainly not going to be a play. Charleston Southern is in a bad spot. They're facing Loyola Chicago. Loyola is up from 17.5 to 18.5. I think Ken Pom has this around 16. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to lay that many points with anybody, but Charleston Southern as like a 20-point underdog or something like that just came within a couple points of South Carolina. They kept that entire game close against South Carolina. So that's another situation a little bit similar to New Mexico State. So I think New Mexico State is worse, but Charleston Southern, they're in a really bad spot. They're one of the worst teams in college basketball as well. Ken Pom has them ranked 342 out of 362 in D1, real bad. And they played like their game of the year pretty much against their in-state big brother there in South Carolina, which is one of their biggest games on their schedule, maybe the biggest to them. And they came within 4 points. So I think they're just in a total hangover spot here against Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago started out really bad, but now they're starting to turn it on, and they're coming off a loss to South Florida, which South Florida is not an awful team, so I don't know. I don't know what you can glean from that. That's somewhat of a big game-ish, I guess, but I'm not going to quite be able to get there laying this many points with Loyola, but that's the way I would lean there. I think Charleston Southern is in a massive hangover spot after such a close call against one of the big-name teams in their state in the University of South Carolina, so it's a bad spot for Charleston Southern there. And then finally the other play that I'm on, which was going to be the only play, or actually One other lean real quick. Lean against Northeastern. They're up from 4 to 4.5, though, against Central Connecticut State. But Ken Palm has this one at 2. So I do lean to Central Connecticut State. Northeastern's coming off losing to Virginia by 2 as a huge underdog. That was a huge performance for Northeastern. So it's another one of those smaller teams where what are they really going to have left after playing such a huge game against such a big team like that? That's what Northeastern did. However, Central Connecticut State, the reason I can't get on this one is that Central Connecticut State, they just beat UMass Lowell as a pretty big underdog as well. I think they were probably around a 10-point underdog in that game. So that's a big win for Central Connecticut State as well. Even though playing Northeastern, they might consider that to be a big game too. But I just can't quite get there because I don't want to be on a team that just pulled off a pretty big upset like that. But Northeastern, I think, has to be in the worst spot. And they actually played 2 kind of big games in a row. They played Vermont really tough in the game before then. Vermont, they're usually like the best team in, whatever that conference is that they're in, the American East, whatever. But that game against Virginia, man, Northeastern playing them so close, I don't think they're going to have that much left. So, and it kind of looks like a trap because Northeastern, people know that they're like at least like a decent team in their conference in the Colonial, and Central Connecticut State, not very good. So that's the way I look at that one. Northeastern, however, it looks like Ken Palm has them as a very unlucky team. So there is that aspect of it, the luck aspect of it. And looking at luck, how about 2 teams that are among the luckiest? This is the game that I'm actually on. Both of these teams are lucky, but I'm fading Indiana. And Indiana is down from 13.5 to 13 at home against Morehead State. I think this line is way off, actually. I think Indiana they're being lined based on their name alone. So the Ken Palm only has them winning this game by 9, which is just ridiculous. They're playing Morehead. Morehead is on a nice win streak, and Morehead hasn't really played like any tough games recently. They're just in like playing a bunch of tune-up games almost, like beating some teams that are lesser than they are. Indiana's coming off a game where they bounced back from a really bad performance against Auburn and got really destroyed by Auburn. Then they played Kansas, and they played them to within 4, a tough game against Kansas, coming off a slew of big games in a row for Indiana. And that Auburn game was sandwiched in between Michigan and Kansas, a big Big Ten matchup, and then the big Kansas game. Coming off of that with only a couple days off, I think it's going to be tough for Indiana to completely turn it around here. Morehead's not that bad a team. Indiana coming off that close call, almost beating Kansas. I think it's going to be tough for them, a tough stretch of games in Indiana. Ken Palm has them as the 80th best team in the country, and people are like treating them like they're one of the better teams, like in the borderline, like a top 25 team where they're not even close. They're thriving just based off of their name alone. So I'm on Morehead plus 13. That's what I'm doing there. And like I said, Ken Palm has both teams as being really lucky teams. So I don't know what you can glean from that. I think Indiana and Mississippi are like 2 of the most overrated teams right now. Ken Palm has Mississippi even worse, like around 90, and they're in the top 25 in rankings right now because they haven't lost. So look for both of those teams to maybe not do as well in the later portion of the season. Maybe I think those teams are not as good as we think they are. I'm not going to play anything in the NBA. Let's try to get this done real quick. One lean in the NBA, though. I just don't, like I said, even though the Pelicans had a huge blowout win the other night against the Spurs, I just don't like laying these big road favorites. But the best NBA play on the board would be to do so with the Phoenix Suns. But they are also up from -5 to -7, -5.5 to -7. With juice. I don't think I can do it. They have 71% of the cash on their side. 78% of the tickets are on the Trailblazers. Somehow the Blazers are getting the public action. That doesn't make sense to me, but the market discrepancy looks like it is there. The Blazers are coming off the game that I was on with them where they were tied with the Golden State Warriors really late into that game. And it's a situation where they might not have that much left after that game, even though, yeah, it is the Phoenix Suns, and you might not be totally unfocused for the Phoenix Suns, but they're coming off that pretty tough game there where they basically took Golden State to the wire. Phoenix, on the other hand, is coming off a bad game where they played pretty poorly against the Wizards and barely escaped with a 4-point win, a game where the Wizards were beating them almost the entire game, and Phoenix was a 12.5-point favorite in that game. Phoenix had to really turn it on in the fourth quarter, and they had been losing like the whole game prior to that. Wound up winning the game, so that's like an escape, which I think puts Phoenix in a spot where they're going to be focused, even though they're playing another bad team in the Trailblazers. So that's the way I lean there, but I can't quite get there with it. Phoenix Suns, I think, are the best look on the board, though, and the market read looks like it's there as well. But on the NBA board, yes. I have one NHL play that I think is a decent spot. I will mention quickly before I get out of here. Got to get out of here quickly. Shit. Tampa Bay is in a bad spot. They're down from -172 to -166 on the money line. This is not my play, but they have 83% of the tickets, but 70% of the cash. So they are a public home favorite there. Tampa Bay returning home from a road trip, a long road trip, 5 games that took them up to the Pacific Northwest area in Western Canada. It's going to be a tough spot returning home from a road trip like that for Tampa. They do have 2 days off, but really tough, and they have Vegas up next, so that almost makes it like a sandwich because you have that the return home distraction angle, and then you have Vegas, and then Washington, then Florida, then the Rangers, all bigger games up next. So it's possible that they get caught here by the St. Louis Blues. The only problem I have with it, and I would be on the St. Louis Blues otherwise, St. Louis also played a couple days ago, and they beat Dallas in overtime. But now they are starting a road trip, so you might say that's still going to be like a focus spot when you return home from a road trip. But they won their last 2 games at home, so I don't like the fact that this might break their momentum a little bit. And they're coming off a huge overtime win over a really good team in Dallas, so I think they could be in a little bit of a letdown spot as well. So even though I do think the spot is worse for Tampa, I lean to St. Louis there. I can't quite get there because I think St. Louis is in a bad spot. The game that I'm actually on, this is a bad spot for Buffalo, and I'm going back. I'm on the Columbus Blue Jackets again. I mean, they did it for me last time, but we'll see. Buffalo's up from -157 to -174 on the money line, so it looks like they're getting some of the money, which I don't like. Pre-game right now is, I know I said Ken Palm yesterday. I meant pre-game when I was talking about the market percentages and whatever game that was yesterday. I think it was a hockey game too. Ken Palm does college basketball, you fool. No, so Buffalo is up from -157 to -174 on the money line. They have 67% of the tickets, and pre-game is saying they have 100% of the cash, which can't be right. Although I think Buffalo is going to be the public team because why would Columbus be? Columbus is one of the worst teams in hockey, but Buffalo, they're in a bad spot. They're returning home from a 3-game road trip where they went out and they played the Avalanche, Vegas, and they won at Vegas, and then they finished the road trip losing in a game that I was on in the letdown spot at Arizona. Now they do have 2 days off, but it's still a return home distraction spot, man, even though it was only a 3-game road trip and they do have 2 days off. You get Columbus. Like, are you really going to be totally focused on Columbus, or are you going to be suffering from a little bit of those return home distractions and dealing with family and whatever the case might be, especially when in 2 days you have Toronto up next, and then you have New York, the New York Rangers, and then Boston. So Buffalo has 3 bigger games coming up after this. So that makes this kind of like a sandwich spot as well, kind of like what I said with Tampa. Returning home from a road trip, Buffalo, not really that good a team either. Playing a team that they might overlook, and they have bigger games coming up on deck. Even though if you're 13-16 or 13-16-3, I mean, yeah, you might show up and you might not want to overlook anybody, but even so, it's the Columbus Blue Jackets, man. They have not been playing well. And for Columbus, I think they're in a spot where they might bounce back because they just lost a game at home to the New Jersey Devils, which wasn't a good game for them. They lost 6-3. They were coming off a nice big overtime win at Toronto, though. So they were kind of in a bad spot. And I think that was the game I was on, if I remember correctly. That was the last time I played Columbus in that game against Toronto. They had a big overtime win. Nice upset there. They came back home, suffered the letdown 2 days later against New Jersey. Now they have 2 days off as well, and they get to break that like losing momentum and get out of home again and go out on the road to play this one game at Buffalo. I think it's a better spot for Columbus. They're a team that I don't think they're going to be overlooking anybody really, even though they have Washington, Toronto, New Jersey, Toronto all up next. I think they might be more focused because they're coming off a pretty bad 3-goal loss there. So I like the Columbus Blue Jackets there. I'm on it at plus. I'm on the money line, plus 150. So that's going to do it for these plays today. We've hit a new peak for for the year, man. Let's keep it up. So those plays again are Morehead State plus 13 in college basketball, Stephen F. Austin minus 10.5 in college basketball, Columbus Blue Jackets plus 150 on the money line in hockey. Let's do it. Let's get out of here. Peace. Have a good day, man. Enjoy all this. Enjoy the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl. Peace.